How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion. Does one bad choice make a bad person? That's an interesting question. Me and Russ came across that question the other day during our dialogue, and we kind of answered it, but then we kind of sped right through it because we were covering something else. And then I got some questions sent through my email, which is pretty cool now. And I wanted to see if I can answer these questions. There's 5 of them. So I thought in my effort to give what the audience is requesting, I'm going to go ahead and respond back to the questions that were asked. And again, today's topic is, does one bad choice make you a bad person? So the first question that was sent my way was, Gangi, have you ever judged someone based on a single action, and did your opinion ever change later? Yes, and I think everyone has done that. If I don't know somebody, the first thing I'm going to look at is their behavior right in front of me, and of course I'm judging their behavior and not who they are. And again, that's because I don't have enough history on them. So my first impression has been wrong a lot of times. And again, usually my own intentional effort in getting to know who that person is, getting to understand the situations that they're in, the pressures that they face, how they see the world, their interpretation, what their intents are, then you may start to see those individuals a bit differently. So with that said, yes, I have been wrong because I have been very limited in the knowledge of who that person is in front of me. But once I start to know who they are, once I start to understand how they see the world, whether their choice was right or wrong, their perspective does matter to me. So yes, and has my opinion changed later? Yes. I don't know if I go out and tell them that. I don't know if I tell them, hey, I thought you were this at first and now you're not. But I think there are some people that I didn't like when I first met them. Right now that I hang out with. It's just more about the intentional effort of trying to figure out a little bit more of that person, as opposed to just seeing that one bad choice, casting judgment, and then walking away. And now, with that said, I want people to be clear that there are certain choices that could make you a bad person, but usually it's a choice that's the outcome of a pattern. So it's the pattern that made you a bad person or a bad individual. And then you finally made the choice to act on whatever that pattern is. So with that said, that's one thing that we look for in corrections is patterns. Patterns truly tell us who somebody is more than just something situational. We look for patterns. It provides us some level of context. And I think context is key when it comes to passing judgment, whether inside or outside the wall, understanding their perspective. Why did you do what you did? What was the reason behind it? And again, that's not to minimize crimes that are predatory in nature. I just want to let people know, for some, there's maybe a story behind it that may be very interesting. So it gives you a chance to understand the situations that people face, understand the decisions that they made from their perspective of that situation, and also the pressures that we may not be aware of. It's funny because we give ourselves a lot of forgiveness because we know more about ourselves. We know the pressure, we know the situation, but for someone else, we don't give them that same forgiveness. Because with that said, I don't know what you're facing. I just see you as a person. So again, I think we all may have done that, judge someone based on a single action, and then later change their opinion, or our opinion. All right, next question. Should the circumstances surrounding a bad choice change how we see the person who made it? So again, when you discern who or why that choice was made, obviously there are certain people that they're just bad people. And there's a pattern of behavior that shows you that more than the choice does. It's just, this is what led up to it. I mean, it's funny when you look at a lot of crimes and you have that hindsight bias, you look back and you look at all these things that were telltale signs of who that individual was. And it's funny how it becomes clearer after the fact. But having said that, there's these patterns, and correction professionals are trained to look at the patterns. That's what we're trained to do. So with that said, it could change how we view somebody. If someone makes a bad choice, they try to sell you an image or excuses as to why they did it. Maybe you buy in initially. Maybe, I believe it's all excuses. I get it. But in their mind, maybe it makes sense. But with that said, that's where tactical empathy comes in, by the way. Tactical empathy lets you see the other person's perspective, but not get too blinded by their feelings or emotions, because you still have to see things objectively. But for this question here, should circumstances surrounding a bad choice change how we see the person who made it? Yes, and it can go both ways. But with that said, if someone did make a bad choice, and then you start to communicate with them, you start to find out their reasoning, their interpretation of it, whether right or wrong. Again, you're approaching it with a state of curiosity, not judgment. Then there could be a chance that it changes how you view things, but it all matters on the consequences of their actions. There are some individuals that I mentioned before in an older video that they act impulsively, and that's why we have programs like anger management and focus on the victim, so we can teach them how to better handle themselves during situations where they feel that they're losing emotional control, but also provide them a perspective of what their actions do and how it makes other people feel. So with that said, there's a great balance here. But there are some people, as I said, that commit to something based on the pressure of a situation. It doesn't mean this is who they are. They just fell victim to the impulse. And unfortunately, they acted on that impulse. And that doesn't mean that they don't feel remorse. Because once that emotion leaves, they start to kind of relive that horrible incident over and over again to the point where it haunts them. And again, this is not to forgive them for what they've done. I'm not saying that, or to minimize what they've done, but to let you know how they start to think about it. They start to ruminate, because again, they led by the emotions. At that point, it was more about justifying that emotion, get that win. But then eventually, when that emotion fades, they have to deal with that moment. So I have seen people that have been quite remorseful because they have truly acted on their emotion, and then there's the regret. But then I have seen people that just, they don't see it, and they're not going to change. Even though we'll make the effort, they're not going to change. They don't see the world the way we see it. And to be honest with you, we really can't force that perspective, because they just don't understand it. They don't process it. They don't process the world the way we do. So again, if that makes any sense. All right, next question. There's 3 more. When it comes to judging character, what's more important to you, intent or outcome? Well, okay, so this is a tough question, because intent can always be part of an image that they're trying to sell. So let me put this in a context that I buy the intent. Okay, so I'm not being manipulated. There truly was a good intent, and it's not about an image that the person is trying to sell. So with that said, sometimes we don't control the outcome. All we do is control our effort towards something. And sometimes people can make the attempt to do something good and it become totally disastrous, and I get that. So that's when you really have to get to know the individual and try to fill in the gap of, hey, why did you do that? And then manage the gap between why they did it to what has happened. And I think when you are a professional and when you interact with these inmates and you're trying to help them rehabilitate, that is a big part of what's being done, the why and the consequences of the what, because they want to try to see if somewhere this all makes sense to them, and how do I now go ahead and maybe shift that perspective if the why is not really aligned with what you're trying to accomplish. Because remember, guys, we may see the world one way, but sometimes people are raised in a world where good is not so easily available. So their benefits are usually for some level of selfish gain, because they don't know any better, because they're constantly in survival mode. And again, not trying to minimize what they've done, but it's how they view things. So when you kind of deal with people that are constantly in survival mode, that just worry about themselves, then it's good to have them exposed to people that have been hurt by crimes or been damaged by the consequences of someone's selfish actions. And then that may be the first time they actually see that. Oh, I didn't know that happens. I didn't know that what I'm doing caused that ripple effect. And now what you try to do is you manage that individual and you try to get them to do a complete mind shift. And sometimes it is difficult, because in corrections, you're going to try to introduce them to this mind shift in a world that doesn't want that to happen in some cases. But I have seen people rise above that situation, rise above the pressure to do what's easier for them, to do what's accepted, and truly become successful in the end. and it's hard work. But I think I noticed that early in my career. I noticed sometimes giving someone good advice it doesn't always translate to immediate good action because there's so many barriers in the way. There's so many obstacles that are stopping them from doing that. But sometimes I see the effort. Sometimes I would see the struggle, but they're trying. And I would appreciate that a lot more than a quick outcome, because sometimes the outcome is really not dependent on the person putting the effort. Sometimes things are easier for one than it is for another. And then we take the onus of the outcome, both good or bad, as if we were in total control. You could have some people that get blessed to have good outcomes because they have less pressure. And then they take the benefit of that and they say, yeah, I'm just doing that good. Well, you haven't really had the pressure like these individuals. So I really can't judge you solely on the outcome because you're really not putting the effort in. And then you get people who put the effort in but just can't get it because there's so many obstacles. But for them, it's like the effort is great. They're really trying. They're just not getting the outcome because there's so many obstacles that are in their way that we have to try to work around. So again, I think it matters. If you get people that lean on the outcome, it could be detrimental. You can get people that are extremely successful and believe that the success is truly about what they're doing when that's not the case. And then if you go to put them into another situation where there's higher pressure, they fail because they haven't been challenged. And then you get people who get the obstacles that want to be successful and lean into the outcome, and then it turns out that things don't go their way, and they take a level of ownership on that could be detrimental to them because they believe that they can't change who they are when this is more situational. And then if you move them to another situation that is a little bit easier for them to deal with, where there's more support, they succeed. So I think effort matters over outcome, 100%. All right, next question. Can someone truly change without first owning the harm that they caused? And that's a no. You cannot change unless you take ownership, and ownership for the right reasons. Some people take ownership to what they've done because it's a sense of pride, a sense of ego. You find that with very highly narcissistic individuals that they own what they've done because it connects to their ego, their pride, their reputation, whatever it is that they're trying to gain. But then you get some that maybe have acted impulsively and they're afraid to take ownership because it admits something that they don't want to face. And I've seen people get haunted in their dreams by what they've done. And they know that they have to have some level of ownership to honestly move forward. But it's not something that they should do alone, because you're talking about dealing with regrets that cannot be changed, cannot be fixed, hurting someone to a point that you cannot come back from. So they need to be guided through that in a manner that's healthy. Now, with that said, this comes a part about restorative justice here, because part of that accountability may come to some level of addressing the people that they've hurt. Now, if that's allowed or not, that could be different depending on what the case is. But there are some cases where they do allow the individuals to talk to the victims or the people that have been hurt by the crime that they've committed. And it's not so much for a sense of forgiveness, but rather for them to give the family closure. This is totally being done for the victims, of course, because if the victims don't want to do it, it doesn't happen. And then the inmate or the offender will directly benefit or indirectly benefit to some extent from providing that closure. So it is mutually beneficial. But I would like people to know that it's really, if it doesn't help the victim, then you have to find another way to work with the offender who committed the crime, because the victim has to be a part of this. And if they can't, because of whatever reasons, you're not going to force the victim into this type of dialogue or exchange. But with that said, I have seen success in this. I've seen people, and this kind of goes back to the first question, misjudge the person from their behavior because of what the outcome was, not realizing that what they've done could have been situational, could have been a skewed view of how the person sees the world or whatever it is. But then the person grows up and matures, and they really do embrace ownership of what they've done. And ownership comes with the consequences of what they've done. And now there's a shift, because now the victim sees that this is not just about what they've done, but the person. And this person may not have been a bad person. They may just have done something that was really bad. But with that said, they're not a bad person. And some of these victims may go back and say, I would like to speak to them, because I truly think that this was situational. And at this point, maybe there's a way we both can get closure, but it has to be done with, of course, the victim's approval. And I've seen this happen. I've seen people take true ownership of what they've done and then want to kind of have that final closure with the victim's family. And by the way, the closure is not selfish in this nature, because what they're trying to do is give the family closure, so they know that, again, it's not to give excuses for what they've done, but rather justification, so they know, at least I may have hurt this person and there's really nothing I can do to change that, but I gave the family what they needed to move on, which is also me understanding the consequences of what I've done, and noting that I was wrong without no excuses, nothing. I took full ownership of it. And that's a powerful exchange. If you ever seen that happen, it's a powerful exchange, because some victims do forgive. And then the person that's on the other side who committed the crime becomes overwhelmed because they don't expect it. It's beautiful, yet heartbreaking at the same time. It's a very unique situation. Okay, last part. At what point do repeated mistakes stop being bad choices and start defining someone's character? So that's kind of a question we touched on earlier before, and this is where I believe in corrections we pretty much excel at. We look at patterns. We don't look at what's just in front of us. We look at what kind of leads to the moment. Contextual matters. Context matters. So with that said, justifications become excuses. You see individuals who that's their way of thinking. They will not change. And then you see the selfish gain. You just see it. And it's not so much what's in front of you, but the patterns. And you have to question them. Why'd you do that? But why do you keep doing that? What's going on? What's happening? And it's really the patterns that are developed that truly tell you who that person is. And I think that is where the professionals also get involved. They understand the person, they understand the situations, the pressure they face, but they also understand the patterns of who that individual is and what they always go to. Sometimes, yes, it could be impulsive and they'll try to manage the impulse, but sometimes you have individuals that just don't care, and you could see it in their patterns. There's no remorse, there's no regret. They just move forward as if nothing happened. And now at that point, that's not even just about bad choices. That's just an individual who is a bad person. That's it. They just don't care. They have no sense of empathy. And it comes out in the patterns because they keep on repeatedly doing the same thing, causing the same hurt to others without any actual remorse. And trust and believe the people that professionals know how to read true remorse over someone that's just being performative. Because even nice is being performative. They read through it. And even if you try to sell that image the first time and you do it again and again and again, I don't care what you're selling me in front of me, what you're showing in front of me right now. I don't care. Your pattern's telling me who you are. And it's that simple. And yes, at one point, if the pattern is extreme and they just don't care, then at that point, that's who that person is. I'm sorry. And we'll do our best to try to work with them. But with that said, we can only do so much. It's about our effort as well. They're in control of that part of the outcome. As always, guys, the show is here. So I hope you enjoy the content. Please subscribe and interact. Stay safe.